Yes. Okay. All right. So we are here in week 13. So we scroll down. That's this bucket, 420. So we're going to be doing introduction to VueJs. We're going to be trying to, understand the Vue methods and data binding that we're going to see. And we're going to be creating a very small Vue app as like a little intro to Vue. So everything that we're going to be doing today is going to be on a .html file, and we're going to be using the script tag to embed our JavaScript code for the Vue app. And so it won't be until next week when we start like pairing these two that we get into a little bit more complexity. But we're just going to start kind of, wading through Vue, trying to understand a little bit on how it is. So let's go to the slides, week 13. That's today. All right. So let's present here. Fantastic. So this is kind of our agenda. We're going to be talking about what exactly is Vue JS, kind of why this class in general has always picked Vue JS. And this is a complex topic, but we're just going to kind of discuss a little bit of the reasons. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about working with VueJS. So, understand how to create a new Vue app, understand some of the methods and properties that we have available to us in Vue, and try to start understanding what Vue directives are, right? And how we can use those inside of our application. And then, of course, we're going to do a code demo. And again, this is going to be inside of a HTML file. So if you look at week 13, you'll see that there's just a singular HTML file that we're going to sort of fill in. So in saving, the only thing I really saved there was typing out a bunch of extra HTML because we're going to be typing a lot of HTML. Also with a lot of JavaScript, of course. And then homework/lab, I think I actually retitled it as lab and then left it here as homework, but whatever. It all counts the same grade anyway, same amount of points. But the homework/lab portion is going to be taking this code demo and essentially expanding it and adding a couple of features here, just so that you actually are getting a grade and doing some work and actually actively interacting with the framework. Otherwise, if I don't assign an actual assignment, then everybody kind of walks away from Vue and won't touch Vue again until next week. So this is going to kind of get you playing with the Vue side of things for VueJS, and also how that interacts directly with the HTML on the page. All right, so what is Vue? Well, obviously it's pronounced like Vue, which is kind of what everybody's heard me saying, but in case you're reading these slides later, or we only have 60 people right now in this class, so in case somebody else out there is not participating today but wanted to see the slides, then they understand how to pronounce it. So it's pronounced like the word Vue. It's a pretty progressive JavaScript front-end framework, and it's for building user interfaces, right? So everything we've been doing has been in Node.js. We've been all on the back side, the back end of things, right? So in computer science, right, you have the front end and you have the back end. And Node.js is considered backend. It's considered server-side because you're interacting with things like file systems and databases, HTTP requests, and actually setting up a legitimate server like we did last week. And so Vue is going to be on the front-end side. It's very much the front-end framework. It interacts in the browser, right? So no matter what browser you use, as long as you're using some major browser, whether it be Firefox, Mozilla, Brave, Safari, even if you're using Internet Explorer, or I think it's now called Edge, all of that, it should behave perfectly fine with Vue. If you're using sort of some, Brave is one of those newer browsers that offers a lot of privacy and security. So if you're using something even more cutting edge than Brave, then, and they have JavaScript disabled, which is what a lot of them do, then obviously you're not going to be able to use Vue. But obviously you should be using a browser currently in this class that interacts with JavaScript, since that's what we're doing. Vue is pretty approachable. That's one of the reasons why we pick it. So if you're already familiar with HTML and CSS and JavaScript, which JavaScript you should be because we're taking this class, but hopefully HTML and CSS maybe picked up a little bit of that from, I think that was the 1220 class, then you're kind of already on your way to being able to quickly pick up and start building a Vue application. It's not to say that, you know, Angular and React, which are the other two big frameworks that a lot of people hear, it's not to say you can't do that just as easily. Just to me, it feels like you need to learn a little bit more about the framework itself and sort of all the life cycle pieces, versus Vue, you can almost just dive right in, and we're going to be doing that today. We're going to see how quickly and easily it is kind of to pick it up. It is versatile, so it's not as if you know, just small companies use this, or you'll just see this for people building personal portfolios or small websites. Vue is used by a lot of major companies, and you can do something as simple as building like a nice, simple, single-page application, like if you wanted to compose a portfolio, to very sophisticated web applications out there, right? So it's sort of spans the gamut of what you can use it for. Vue is also pretty performant and very small. So you can see here, if you take the minimized version of Vue, it's about 30 kilobytes. And 30 kilobytes of JavaScript comparative to the other, you know, React and Angular, that's pretty small to get a front-end framework up and running. So that's, you know, this kind of what is Vue, and this also kind of, you know, we're going to answer a little bit as to more of the why, but hopefully you can see kind of a little of the reasons why we're choosing Vue here. So here you can see more of the performance thing that we're talking about. So if you were sort of this, you know, really is just taking the same kind of, you know, application and running it against 3 different metrics, or 4 different metrics. One, you have what we call vanilla JS. That's just if you used pure JavaScript to go ahead and build out some kind of single page app, right? So we're not talking about applying any framework. We're talking about just using basic JavaScript. And then you can see that Vue is more performant than Angular and React. And it's not much more performant than Angular. We can see we do get a lot of performance here from React, but it does have a little bit more of that performance power. So you might be saying, well, you know, that 0.2 of a point there, that's hardly anything. You know, why are we not, you know, just going with Angular? And sort of the question is newer Angular uses TypeScript. And so in order to really, you know, get and understand and, you know, lay out Angular in the way that it should be approached, you would need to understand TypeScript. And everybody in this class right now has had a big focus on JavaScript. And TypeScript and JavaScript are very, very much the same. But with TypeScript, as you can kind of hear by the name, you start adding a lot of type safety to your JavaScript, essentially. Essentially, TypeScript is just transpiled from the TypeScript language into the JavaScript language. That's because the browser doesn't understand TypeScript. So we would be adding a lot of complexity by picking Angular, because first we would need to start understanding TypeScript. Then we need to do the transpile step, and then now we're ready to pick up this framework, Angular. And so that's kind of, again, why we're sticking here with Vue, because we're in this pure JavaScript world. So a lot of front-end frameworks do DOM virtualization, or the way they render the DOM, or the way they do recalculations on the DOM, which hopefully you're familiar with this term. This is the document object model, right? This is what the browser is composed of, right? So when we talk about making DOM updates or recalculations, a lot of times those are very expensive, and that's what front-end frameworks are geared towards, right? When you have dynamic websites and you have new text or new data coming in, you know, Instagram or Twitter are very good examples of this, right? If you're on Twitter and you have new tweets come in by people you follow, you'll notice that they sort of just pop up on your timeline as it happens, right? And every time that happens, what's going on behind the scenes is you're having some DOM updates or some DOM recalculations and some re-rendering going on. And depending on how you approach that, it can be very expensive. And when it's very expensive, what we mean is it slows down the browser, right? And so what you get are these hiccups in the browser. It feels as if your browser is sort of on pause or running in slow motion. So if you're familiar with playing video games, it's almost like your browser is lagging, right? You'll move your cursor, but your cursor doesn't move because your browser is doing something very expensive in the back end. And so we don't want that to happen. So Vue.js takes this, the way it handles re-rendering and, reapplying updates to DOM. It uses what's called DOM virtualization. A lot of frameworks do this, but not all of them. Some use shadow DOM in order to do it. So they're all different. But what a virtual DOM is it's just essentially a way to generate another version of the DOM in memory. And so that way, what we can do is now that we have these two DOMs, right, we can compare this virtual DOM, this one that has these state changes, to the actual DOM. And when this comparison happens, instead of replacing the entire DOM that's old, what we do is we now just swap in what needs to be re-rendered. So instead of the entire page being re-rendered from top to bottom, what we have is just a portion of the page that updates get re-rendered. And so it's a little bit hard to imagine unless you're very familiar with DOM virtualization and how the DOM is re-rendered, but we'll see a little bit of that today. And so why does Vue.js use virtual DOM? Well, it's a lightweight copy of the DOM. It's one way that it's been kind of proven and effective by not only the Vue framework, but other frameworks that use virtual DOM to determine what needs to be updated. And you can get these batch updates to the DOM. So you can, you're not just rendering one thing at a time. You can actually sort of send a whole batch of different updates. Like I need to update, this section, maybe the bottom left section, maybe the middle right section. You can apply all those updates kind of simultaneously. So working with Vue.js. Well, interestingly enough, you don't really need to download or install anything. That's kind of one of the first things you'll notice. And that's often true with a lot of frameworks. But Vue.js will go ahead and recommend that you, just simply use Vue by embedding a script tag in your HTML. And so that's kind of what this looks like here. And so this script tag is asking, CDN or the Content Delivery Network to grab the version of, 2.6.11 of Vue, and that's going to be the current stable build, and that's what you would be interacting with once you sort of put this script tag in your header. And we're going to see how to do that as we build an application. And so now that we have that script tag in our header, we can have access to the functionality that Vue provides us. So every Vue app really starts by creating a new Vue instance. And you do that simply by what you see down here in this code. You can see here I have const app equals a new Vue. That is a function which accepts an object as an argument. And this object has a lot of options on it here. So right now you can see I just have two options. One option is called, or key here, is called EL, that stands for elements. And the other key here I have is for data. When we actually start building our app, we're going to be using the methods key, and we're going to be using the computed key as well, so that we can get a little bit more dynamicness to our app. But this is essentially sort of a minimal Vue app, if you will, sort of the most basic way to create a Vue app. So additionally, when you go ahead and you instantiate or you create this new Vue instance, it will go ahead and automatically add all the properties found inside of the data object. So if you needed to seed your application with some data, this is where you would do it. You would put it inside of the data object. And so we're going to see that today. We're going to be building a grocery list, right? That's kind of more important than ever. Especially now when we have to go out, we want to get into the grocery and out of the grocery as fast as possible. So we're going to be building a grocery list, and we're going to, start with our data. It's going to be a very minimal data set, and we're going to see how Vue interacts with this data binding that we have here. And so in order to, take this JavaScript and relay it onto the HTML page, right, we need some sort of template-based syntax that allows you to bind some values from the JavaScript into the actual HTML. And so the way Vue does this, as we already talked about, right, they have the virtual DOM, but the syntax that you'll see down here is probably one of the most common. It's the double curlies, are also referred to as the mustache syntax. So this is popular not only in the Vue language, but in many languages use the mustache syntax, right? So if you go to Angular or React, you may also see this mustache syntax. So it is double curlies on each side, and you'll see that today. You would open a curly, open a second curly, then you put in some kind of data or variable here, and then you close the two curlies. That kind of is what makes it unique in that. And so here now I can see kind of a little bit, expanding on it. Again, this is a very minimal Vue application. But if I were to have this Vue app and this was going to be my app, then of course you see I've declared a new Vue instance. I've assigned it an element of where the app should be located, and I'm saying it should be inside the app CSS selector. And then I seeded some data for my app, and that data is title and course. And now you can see in the associated HTML how I might be able to access that. And so Vue does a lot of the magic, right? You don't have to, there's nothing really more that you need to do here. That's kind of why we're using a front-end framework. We've seeded it, and now we're able to access that data simply by pulling it off of title and course. And so you notice that, in the past, we might say, well, why are we not accessing this like data.title and data.course? And the answer to that is because data is already built into this Vue app. It's a key word here. Just like elements or EL is key, data is a key word here. And so Vue already knows to look inside of this object when you're trying to render some text in the page. So it allows you to go ahead and omit that first data portion here. It's kind of the nice automagic properties that are happening behind the scene in Vue. So you'll never need to say data dot here. Now you could get a very complex data structure here. This is a very simple one. This just has two keys. We're going to build one that's a little bit more complex. We're going to have an array of objects. And so if this were to be nested, and maybe we had students here, right, then you would have to say something like student dot, name perhaps, or student 0 dot name, depending on what kind of thing you have in here. But you can generally omit this data portion. And then we're also going to be working with Vue directives, and it's really easy to detect what a directive is in Vue because it always will start with the v- prefix. So if you're looking at your HTML or you're scanning somebody else's HTML, or you're looking at the class demo tonight, you'll notice a directive immediately if it starts with v-. And that's really a nice syntax there, because then you don't have to guess at anything, right? You know that, hey, I see v-, this must be a Vue directive. And a directive are simply just attributes and values that are expected to be in this single expression. We can do a lot of things with directives that typically mimic JavaScript. Right, so some V directives that we're going to be using today, and I think a couple more than just these. One, we're going to be using the V model directive. And this will go ahead and start to create that two-way data binding between our data that we have and any kind of updates we want to make on the UI side. Right, so if we want to dynamically interact, which we do, we want to build a grocery list. So as I type in my grocery items, I need to interact with my Vue app. That's how we get this v.model. We're creating that two-way data binding. So hopefully that two-way data binding makes sense, because we're talking about one way is coming into the Vue app and the other way is coming out of the Vue app. So that's the two-directional model. We have the v-for directive, and that allows us to iterate over an array that we've created in our Vue app. And we're going to be doing that, right? We're building a grocery list, so hence the keyword list is obviously an array. And so when we want to iterate over our list, or we want to show all of the items that we're adding to our grocery list, we don't want to have to, as we've seen, we don't want to have to, if we have 100 grocery items, we don't want to have 100, like LIs that we write out, right? And say like item 1, 0, item 2, item 0, item 1, item, 2, like as you would with, sorry, I can't, let me just write it out because, where's my thing? Yes. Right, we wouldn't want to have to do something like this, where we had item 0 and some sort of element for a grocery list, and then item 1, and then item 2, and however many times we had that, right? We want a nice, simple way inside of our HTML to be able to iterate over a list of n number of items. And so that's what this view for gives you, right? So hopefully that was a better explanation, because I was thinking of array, but I don't think it came out correct. And then finally, Vue show. There's two versions of this. We have Vue show, and we also have Vue if, which I don't have on the slide. But essentially, they're very similar to each other. And they will, Vue show is just the simplest expression. It's sort of like show this or don't show this. It's very much a toggle. So if it evaluates to true, it'll show. If it evaluates to false, it will not show. And so you're like, well, how is that different than Vue if? Well, Vue if comes packaged with Vue else. So if you truly had a conditional, or a multi-conditional, then you might want to revert to the Vue if, right? If you just have a simple expression like show this or don't show this, then you would use Vue show. But if you need a conditional of like, if this is true, I need you to do this, but else I need you to render some other element, some other kind of, HTML element, then that's when you would want to use Vue if else. So we'll see, I don't know if we'll see an else today, but we might. All right, so we're gonna be doing obviously a code example, and we're gonna be running through how to start using Vue in our HTML and start, having that two-way data binding, start using those directives, start seeing the Vue model in action. There. And then obviously you should definitely run the code example. We're going to do the extra credit review during lab time as well. And then you're going to want to work on the lab assignment for lab time. So we're going to build an application. We're going to fill in some of the features. And then the lab assignment, if you've already looked at it, is to expand on the application and add new features to the application. So that's what we'll be doing during lab time. All right, so where is my code? Okay, perfect. All right, the weather app, that's the extra credit, so not now. So if you were to go to CS, the GitHub homepage, oh, sorry, I locked my computer accidentally. If you were to go to the week 13 folder, this is sort of what you would see here, right? It's a very simplistic document. And it was really just to save me some time in having to type out, an entire HTML document. Hopefully you're familiar with HTML, right? Because this class doesn't really cover HTML. That's something you should kind of have picked up either on your own research, or you should have taken, if you weren't familiar with HTML, you should have taken, I think it's, like I said, I believe it's 1220. You should have taken 1220 so that you can become familiar with HTML. But to recap, you need to declare a doc type, and since HTML5, you could always declare your doc type using just the HTML. Then you start the HTML tag, and then typically you have a head tag. This is where you include things like your page title, any kind of scripts that you need to bring in right away, things like that. And then you start with the body section. This is where the bulk of your page is going to be headed here. And then a lot of times at the end of the body section, you have a second script tag. And that's oftentimes where secondary packages can be loaded in, or in our case, we're going to use the second script tag to go ahead and embed our Vue app. So our Vue app is going to go here. It doesn't matter, like we could have put this script tag up higher. It's just a little bit unconventional. What you normally see are any script tags in the head are typically files or CSS styling that we need right away. We need that to load in pretty quickly. And then any other script tags down here are sort of secondary. So we're going to go ahead and throw in a couple of script tags that I've already copied and pasted. I probably should have gone ahead and actually just pasted these into this particular file, but I didn't. So here's what we're bringing in, a couple of things. So while you look at that, I'm going to go ahead and create a title tag for this, which is going to be called grocery list app. Okay. And so here you can see, just like from the slides, this is where we're bringing in the Vue package. And so if you're wondering about, well, where do I go get that, or how did you find that, or some question like that, we can exit from here. And if you go to Vue installation and you just kind of scroll down, they'll give you some information here. So you can see that they say you can get it from sort of a content delivery network. And not only can you get it from, CDN.js deliver, you can also get it from unpackaged or CDN.js. So there's a lot of places, there's a lot of actual content delivery networks that Vue provides. So you're not stuck with just one. So it's fine if you want to copy probably this one, since we're not looking for cutting edge Vue, right? We don't want anything to break in our app, and I don't have an idea of all the changes that are that they're pushing out daily. So you probably want to grab this one if you're looking on the page. That's a 2.6.11. Or again, if you were to, go to, you can click here, you can grab it from this distro. Or if my thing would not pop down, you could also grab it from CDN.js distro, right? So a lot of distros, a lot of content delivery networks that they provide. So any of those are still going to be the same package version. So that takes care of that. And so now you can see here, I went ahead and just got it from this version. Like I said, it really doesn't matter which CDN you grab it from. And then to get some styling, I got some styling from Bootstrap, right? There's a lot of different styling libraries out there. Some people use Material.js, some people use Bootstrap.js, right? So if we go Bootstrap, CSS is kind of what we need. Yeah, we want the Bootstrap CSS. So Bootstrap comes with some JavaScript, and we don't really want any of these components. They're very nice, don't get me wrong, but if you start bringing in these components, this might start messing with your Vue application, and we're not really interested in that. So what we're really interested in is just Bootstrap CSS. So you're only wanting to get the CSS styling sheet so that you can bring that in. So make sure that when you do get Bootstrap for the Bootstrap CDN that you're grabbing just the CSS version. So you can go back here and you can see that I'm just grabbing the CSS, right? I'm not grabbing any JavaScript. Like I said, if you grab JavaScript or you grab the combined file or something of that nature, you might kind of mess yourself up a bit. All right. And so that's sort of just the two starting pieces that we need. Now you can see here we have a lot of HTML, but the first thing that we're really going to want to do is go down here and create a Vue app instance. So again, like I did from the slides, I might say something like const app equals a new Vue. And again, we would open that with, the the parentheses, and then it accepts an object as an argument. All right. And then, like we saw also from the demo slides, we need to attach our Vue app to some sort of element somewhere on the page. And typically, you want to do that pretty high up in the page, especially if your app is, if you're not going to have multiple apps and you're only just going to have one app in the page, which is what we plan on doing here, then we kind of want to attach it to somewhere high in the page. So we can see that a good place to attach it would probably be this section text here, right? Because you can see that the section text encompasses pretty much everything from here down to the script tag. And so it's pretty all-encompassing. Otherwise, if we were to include it somewhere down here, then our application only exists between these two tags. And that's not what we want. We want our application to really exist on this entire page. A lot of people like to attach it to the body tag. That's just preference. I personally like it just to attach it to either the top section tag or the top div tag, just depending on how you lay out your HTML. So here, I'm going to go ahead and attach it to this section tag here. So we need to give our element a name. And if you're familiar with CSS, then you know that elements or CSS attributes, they come in two different styles. You can use the dot, and that would represent a class. Or if you use the hashtag, this represents an ID. And so I'm going to use the hashtag style, and I'm going to call it grocery app. And now all I simply need to do is copy this particular titling here, go back to the section tag, use the selector style ID, and set that equal to grocery app. And now I have tied my Vue instance to this entire section here. So you see if I collapse that, pretty much I've tied my Vue instance to every place that I expect to be using the application or that I want the application to be interactive with. All right. Again, if you had tied that Vue instance lower, like let's say you had done it here, then your Vue app would only be contained from here to here, and nothing outside of it would be able to access that Vue app. So it's pretty important that when you're creating your own Vue app, that you ensure that you're doing it in an element pretty high up on that page. And so now we can use the second property that we had seen earlier, right? And that second property was data. And inside data, we're going to keep it pretty simple, and we're going to create an items array because we're going to go to the grocery store and we're going to shop for some items. And we want to keep those items, obviously we're building a list, like I said, and so we want to keep those items in the list. And so now my Vue app is aware of this items array, just inherently. So if we kind of want to see what this looks like right now, I don't know if there's a shortcut in here. I think you can definitely do reveal in Finder, and then from here I can do open with Google Chrome. Boom. So this is what our app looks like right now. And this is how you would view your application. So you can see that the reference is really just a file, and it's the full path of the application. So there's a lot of ways that you can get that, but you just want to paste your full file in any browser. And you can see that this is kind of indeed working, because if we go here and we were maybe to change this to say grocery store items instead of list, right? We say grocery store items, and we save it. We come back out here, we should expect this text to change, and it does, right? So this is how we're going to be sort of looking at our application. All right, so now we're going to go back to the code. So it is aware, this Vue app is aware of items, but you can see nowhere on this page have we actually referenced items. So it's kind of pointless at the moment for it to be aware of items. Not only have we not referenced it anywhere, we don't even have anything in that array. It's just kind of an empty array. So now we need to create a way to, let's say add an item to this array. So the first thing we might want to do is go ahead and create an input field for that, right? We want to be able to type in an item to add to our grocery list. So it seems quite logical to create an input field. And in our input field, this is where we're going to start getting, sorry, it's self-closing. This is where we're going to start getting a lot more information in here. So the first thing is our input field is going to be type text. So like I said, hopefully you're familiar with just general HTML things, right? Input fields can be like checklists, they can be radio buttons, it can be different types of inputs. So you typically need to say what type of input field you want to create. And we're creating a text type input. Now, since I've imported Bootstrap, and I'm a little bit familiar with their classes, I'm going to assign a class to this just to kind of make it look a little bit prettier than it would be if we were just using raw HTML, right? We know CSS is what controls our styling, hence cascading styling sheets. And I'm just using some basic Bootstrap to give it a little bit nicer look, right? This is not the most beautiful grocery store list you're ever going to see, but nonetheless, we're going to make it not the ugliest one you've ever seen. And next, you can add placeholder text, right? So hopefully you're familiar, again, with this one. And so this would just be something like items to purchase, question mark. So an item to purchase, that's what you would, that's kind of what you would want to do there. And then I did forget one tiny thing that I forgot down here. And so what we actually need to do, we have items, of course, but the way Vue works, I mean, we could make this work with just the one key, but one, to show you a little bit more dynamicism on Vue, and just to kind of make it a little bit cleaner syntactically, it makes a lot more sense to create a second entry here. So we're going to create this second entry as what we're going to call a new item. And so this new item is essentially the item that we would be adding to the items array, right? And we're going to see how that works here in just a second. All right, and I remembered that because I finally got to actually doing that. So now we're going to use the Model Directive. And if we remember from the slides, right, we go back, kind of take a quick look here at slide 13. Right, Model is what's going to create this two-way data binding from our form input field into our Vue application, right? And Vue will automatically pick the correct way to update these elements based on type. So we know that we need this two-way data binding because as we enter a new item, we need to take that new item, we need to get that to our Vue app. Our Vue app needs to add that to our items array, and perhaps display on the screen what items are in that items array, right? That's going to make a better grocery store list. Otherwise, if we just keep dumping things in the bucket, we can't really see, like, did we add milk twice or did we add bread twice, right? We kind of want to see what's on our list. So that's why we're using the Model Directive, is to get this nice two-way data binding between this input field here and our Vue application. So our Model is going to point to new item, right? And that's why I created this down here. So now we have that two-way data binding between this input field here and this data item inside of our Vue app. So that's the Model. And then typically you need a way to go ahead and enter that. So we could do a lot of things, but I kind of want to show you two different ways to use Vue. So the most popular way would be doing an add click feature here, right? And you would create like a button, and that might help you. But like I said, I want to show you two ways today. So we're not only going to do a button, but we're going to do a key entry. And so we're going to use the key up syntax and .enter. And so this is a Vue syntax which is saying that it's looking for a keystroke, and the particular keystroke that it happens to be looking for here is the actual enter key, right? So you can see how this might be really nice in changing forms, right? You'll notice that if you're on a lot of pages, you actually have the ability to like Control A, Control C, Control V, inside of forms. And a lot of that is because they've added these nice key up features to that. So our key up so when we hit an enter item, we want to call a function, and that's going to be add item. So now we have a little bit of work to do inside of our Vue thing. So all we've done is we've created a very simple input field. It's a type text. It's got some styling from Bootstrap. It's got some placeholder text. It's data binded to the new item inside of our Vue application. And anytime a user hits enter, we want to fire the function add item. But if you notice here, we don't have any add item functions, right? We haven't created one yet. So now it makes perfectly good sense to create a add item method. So here, Vue offers another key called methods. And methods then expands into an object. And from here, you can add as many methods as you need to your Vue application. And the method that we need, as we already know, is titled add item. And so when you're ready to make a Vue method, you just simply say function, you open the braces, and now you have your add item method. And so if we wanted to do nothing more than console.log this.new item, hopefully this is what we'll see on the screen. Well, not necessarily on the screen, but on our console. So we have just a little bit of here, so let's go ahead and just make sure this little bit of code that we've written so far is actually working. Otherwise, we've written a lot of code for nothing, so we need to go check out that this is working. So I'm going to go to the grocery store list. I'm going to do a quick inspect, right? I'm going to try to come over here to the console. You can already see Vue is running because I have these nice little console.logs. So let's go ahead and do a quick refresh. Boom. Now you can see we do have an input field here. It says items to purchase, right? And so if I added the word milk and I hit enter, you can see that nothing happened on the page yet because we haven't handled that. But what we did get is our actual event fired because we got a console.log milk, right? And if I were to say bread and I hit enter again, you can see that our function is indeed firing, right? Because it's logging out here to the console. I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Okay, I can. Fantastic. All right, so you can see it is logging here to the console. So far we have a working Vue application, especially as we can see here. So just, again, just type a lot of text, doesn't matter, hit enter, you can see that's actually here. So we do have that two-way data binding set up. Now we just need to do a little bit more work to start handling this data that we're receiving. So now let's go back to our application. So we're good here. We do have a two-way data binding. We're seeing that come through to our console. Our key up enter is working, right? I mean, I know you can't see me hit enter, but every time I typed a word, I just simply hit that return key, and that is what sent it over here to this console.log. So now we need to go ahead and do a little bit of logic here, right? So the idea is we want to take this item, this new item, milk, bread, whatever, and we want to put it into our items array. All right, so let's go ahead and think about that for a second. So a lot of times, when you start putting things in arrays, you might need to eventually remove them out of arrays, right? You put something in, eventually you're going to need to put it out. So we might say something like, okay, the value is this new item, and we might also want to trim the item, right? So we might want to say this new item dot trim. And why are we doing that? Well, that's because again, we have end users here. And if they were to type milk space, 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 right, then that would be what gets into the array, because Vue doesn't make any kind of assumptions to say, like, you don't want 15 spaces on the end of the word milk, right? It doesn't make that assumption at all. So when it came, when it comes over here to this particular function here, what this new item would actually be would be something like that. And now if you're the application builder and you want to remove the word milk, as we kind of know, if we have this string here, that string, does not equal the string of this, right? So by applying the trim function, essentially what we get is say, well, we don't really care if the user types an infinite amount of white spaces. We really just want to trim all that off, right? So that's kind of all we're doing with that trim function. We're just simply saying that we want to trim off that excess white space, okay? And the next thing we might want to do is make a conditional check, right? So if after we trim all that white space off, if there's no value, why would we even put it in our array? And so we might want to return early. So that would prevent the user then from coming over here and doing something like, space, 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 enter. Now we've trimmed all that white space off. We're left with nothing. Why do we want to put nothing in the array, right? We don't want to put an empty string in the array. So we're just kind of doing some user check and balances here. That's all we're kind of doing. So if there's no value, we're just going to return. We're not going to let the user add nothing to the items list. All right. So now we can kind of go on to do a little bit more work here. So we can say, okay, well, finally this dot items, and we know items is an array, dot push, and we're going to want to make an object out of it. And so why are we not just pushing the value of milk in? Why are we not just pushing our title of our item of milk? Right. Well, the reason why we're not doing that is because we're going to create a checklist, a way to mark things off of our list. And so if we just simply put milk in there, it would be a lot harder to track, right? Like as you're going down the grocery aisle, you typically, or maybe not a lot of you guys, but you might have noticed, your parents, somebody older, mark it off their list with a pen, right? That's what you would see. And so that's kind of essentially what we're doing digitally, right? We're going to create a list and we're going to say, like, did we complete this task, or what's the status of this task, or did we, is it picked up or not, right? So the title is going to be the value, and, we're going to create a variable called is in cart, and is in cart is going to be false. Right, so since we're creating the list, it's not automatically in the cart. All right. And then finally, we need to reset the new item. And that's so that we can clear the box. All right. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. We're first taking the item, we're going to trim all that white space down. If there really is no value there is no items, nobody typed anything, we're going to return early and not let the user enter it. Otherwise, we're going to put that item into our grocery items array up here, this array items. We're going to include whatever value the user typed in there, and we're going to include just the flag to say, is it in the cart or is it not in the cart, right? Have we picked up that item off the shelf, or is it just on our list, right? That kind of thing. And then we're going to reset the new item back to empty. Now that we've already handled it, we can set it back to empty so that we don't get that preserved text in there. So now let's go make sure this is working, and we can do this by doing console.logs this.items. So now we expect to get through this code, and now what we expect to log to the console instead of just this string is an array of objects. So we're going to refresh our file here, and so we'll try to add milk to the cart. And you can see that we did indeed get this printout. And this is going to be a little bit of an interesting printout because this is, remember, this is not just your standard object. This is a Vue style object. And so kind of printing it out in this array, in this This particular format isn't too helpful, but we're just making sure that this is actually what we're seeing, right? We're just seeing that we can indeed get to some kind of items, and we can see that the array value does have 1. So, all right. So don't worry about that too much. That's just really to make sure that we have the items in the cart. So now how are we going to, handle this? All right, well, now we're going to build out a way to display these items in the cart. Right now we have the ability to get an item into the, it's not in the cart, excuse me. We have the ability to get our items onto a list. And so now we want to display that list. All right. So we're going to use a couple of directives here. So just to really just kind of show off directives is really the only reason I'm kind of using them. So one, we can use this vShow directive. So we can say, vShow if, items.length. And so here we'll just put in a paragraph, like, can you see me? Okay. So we're just going to show that how this works, right? So if items.length is true, then this should kind of appear up. So let's go ahead and refresh. So you really can't see anything. So now again, if I add milk, you can see how vShow fired, right? Because now we did put something in that array because we typed in milk, and now that's true. And you'll notice that every time we refresh our application, we refresh the state back to 0. So that is another thing to take into account if you're building this list. We don't have this list backed by a database, right? Again, we're simply using the browser. We don't have any server backing this, right? We don't have any way to store any information. So this is only stored in memory. So essentially, as you type in milk and bread, that's all in memory. And once you hit refresh on the browser, you essentially kill that memory. So again, this is a very simplistic Vue app that is allowing you to, just show things in memory. But next week, when we start pairing that with Node.js and we start having something to back it, you'll start to see that, you don't run into the same problem, right? Obviously, if you have nothing to store your data onto but disk, then you either have to access the disk or you just have to deal with this in-memory issue that we're dealing with right now. But you can see that the vShow does work, right? As long as I have some items, when I refresh this page, items is 0. And as soon as I add an item to the cart, my vShow does indeed fire. So we're just showing how to use that directive. All right, so vShow if items.length. Well, now we actually want to do a little bit more work, a little bit more logic, and start displaying those items. So I'm just going to create a little bit of, like I said, a little bit of niceness around this by using some styles from Bootstrap. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a unordered list, and then I'm going to create a list item right here. And this list item right here, this is how you might choose where you'd like to iterate. So we're going to use the v-for directive now. And so ideally, you have to think of v-for just like a for loop, okay? And so wherever you put your v-for, that is the item, or that is the element that will be recreated over and over and over and over and over again. So if you have 100 elements, you would have like 100 divs or 100 section tags. Or in my case, because I want it to be an unordered list, I would like it to be a list item. So it makes a lot of sense to put a v-for loop on a list item, because if you notice an HTML page, list items can be, a few bullet points or 100 bullet points. So it makes a lot of sense now to, like I said, use this v-for loop over a list item. So every time I get a new list item in the cart, everything between these two tags here, this opening tag and this closing tag, that's what will be rendered. And so we're going to see how that can really, benefit us here and saving us a lot of coding work. So V4 is very similar to JavaScript, and it tries to really mimic it. And so it's just for, you know, some word item in items, where this is really what's representing what you've declared in your data. So the item part here doesn't matter, right? If we really wanted to be obtuse, we could say for X in items. But again, like I said, you know, when you start to write code, you want to be declarative as possible. And so X really doesn't give us any kind of context. And so really it should be for item and items. So again, you can see that this items here represents this. Vue is, like I said, when this gets instantiated, the entire app is aware of anything inside of this data product. So you don't need to do anything magical to make it happen, because this entire section here is encapsulated right there, that the app is already aware that this array exists. And again, I'm just going to add some nice styling here. It's not going to be the most beautiful list, like we said, but this will give us just a little bit. So list, group, item. So this is not, like I said, hopefully you guys know that the class here is not a Vue-related thing. That's just a stylistic-related thing. And so now that I'm kind of ready to do that, let's go ahead and create a quick label here. So another thing we can do is create a label. And now we're going to use the mustache template style, right? And so how do I access my items? Well, you can see here I have view for item in items. And then, so it is indeed an item. And what properties do my items have on it? Well, they have a title and they have a flag, is in cart. Well, the title is really what we're interested in. So item.title. So now let's just go ahead and see, hey, does this actually render? Are we seeing this now on the page versus some sort of console? So let's go ahead and make sure that this logic here actually works. So go out to the grocery store page, give it a refresh. So now hopefully I do have milk. And now this feels a little bit more like a list, right? You can kind of see how we've gone from nothing to something, hopefully. And so as long as I don't refresh my browser, you know, I can keep adding to, you know, this grocery list here. But like I said, this is all in memory. So as soon as you hit that refresh button, you can see it all gets blown away and we get back to that empty array. And that's just, you know, that is what it is when you don't have a database or any kind of other system backing the memory, right? We're only here in memory. So it's only for as good as long as this page is good. All right, so now we have a pretty good list going here. So now we should try to do a couple of other things. All right. So it would be helpful if we could say that, hey, you know, as we've built our list up, now we're taking our digital list to the grocery. And as we go down the aisles, you know, we want to say, yep, we did indeed pick up milk, and we maybe just want to give that a check. All right, so now I'm going to create another input field here. And again, you're going to want to declare a type. And this type is going to be a checkbox field, right? And then we want to attach this checkbox field to some kind of two-way data binding. Because we're saying essentially, like, if somebody checks this box, then in cart needs to be flipped to true, okay? So if somebody checks this box, then we want to sort of, you know, be able to alter that, that essentially that Boolean. And so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna bind that to a V model here, and we're gonna say item.is in cart. There, and then finally I'm gonna just put a nice class around this and call this as the form check input class from Bootstrap again. So that's all I'm kind of doing there. And then I believe this is a closing tag there, okay. All right, so now let's go ahead back to our Vue app here. And is in cart of undefined. So this is another thing. I must have typed something a little bit incorrect. So we're going to look, and you can see that clearly I did. So view model, that feels like it should be right. No, it should be, oh, it is. Oh, you're right. I didn't put it under my, thank you. I put it a little too high. Good call. Thank you. So yes, I put it a little too high. Good. Who said that? That was Zach and Lewis. Thank you guys. Yeah, so you do want to put that. I put it a little too high. I do want to put that in my LI list. Otherwise, it wasn't accessing the property correctly. So now that I've moved that down, give this a resave here. Okay, there we go. We're good to go. Nice catch. All right. So now if I type in milk, this is good. I get a checkbox here. All right. So now how do we really know that this checkbox is working? Because again, going back to the slides, what Vue really said is, hey, when you use Vue model and you create this two-way data binding, Vue automatically picks the correct way to update the element based on the type. So we're kind of, assuming that Vue has noticed that this is a Boolean, and as it gets checked, it's flipping that value appropriately as it gets checked or unchecked. I mean, because essentially a checkbox is truly a Boolean, right? It's either true or false. There's no like halfway check in a virtual checkbox. So let's make sure that Vue is actually doing what it says it's doing, right? So we can go down here to this other section here, and we're just going to write a nice quick little function that maybe will go ahead and count the items that we have not picked up yet, right? So in our section down here, right, we don't want it to repeat, so we're taking it out of the, right, it's not really, this count applies to the whole list group, so it doesn't need to be in here. It could go in this section there, that would be also fine. But we're gonna go ahead and add it just to a new section, just to kind of keep things a little bit separate, hopefully just keep it clean for you guys, like as you're reviewing this. So in this section here, I'm gonna create a span, and I'm going to go ahead and just say that, count, right? And then we're going to eventually want to use some kind of variable here in our mustache tag, right? And so now we're sort of at a weird standstill, because what we want is we want we want this count to be updated, but we don't have any buttons to push. And we really want this count to be updated anytime somebody interacts with our application, but not necessarily, by, they kind of just generically have to interact with it anyway, right? They could interact with it here, and this count should be updated. They could interact with it here by adding a new item, right? So like if I added one item, that would be 1. And then if the checkbox here got checked, but then somebody added another item, right? This has a lot of dependencies on what it's counting, because we're asking for it to count anything that we're still shopping for. Where's the Vue app? Excuse me. So if we're still shopping for items, we want it to count that. So actually, let's update this count to say, still need items, and then this will be the items count, right? So if we put it in the basket, in the cart, then it should decrement. If we add a new item, then it should increment. If we uncheck the box, then it should increment, right? You can see we're in a weird state where we need something to happen kind of if anybody touches the application in 2 different places. So how do we do that, right? How do we tackle that problem? Well, it's really great because Vue has another, aside from this methods, key entry here, they have a key called computed. And computed does exactly this. It essentially will compute properties, based on any of the reactive dependencies, right? And so this property will be recomputed and reevaluated anytime some or one of the dependencies has changed. And that's what we have. We have dependencies on this checkbox, and we have dependencies on these new items. So computed is a perfect place for us to drop in some kind of count function here. So here we use the computed tag, we open the curly braces, and much like the methods, we create a new method. So I'm going to call this the still shopping for method, right? So we're still shopping for these particular items. And so now we're getting a function, right? And so now how can we write this thing? We want still shopping to essentially return a count of how many items we're still shopping for. So as long as they're not checked off the list, then we're still shopping for those items. Or, let's say this were a super interactive app, right? And somebody could add things digitally, and your roommate could type in this application cookies, like while you're mid-shopping, right? Then your app would increment by 1. So that's kind of what we're shooting for here. So we know a lot of JavaScript, so we might do something like const shopping would equal this dot items, and then we could apply a filter function, right? We want to filter out where the items haven't been completed or they haven't been put in the cart. So function item, we'll open that up, and we'll say, return where the item is not in the cart. Item dot is in cart, right? So instead of returning item is in cart, you're putting the not in front of it. So return where the item is not in the cart. So if we remember from way back when, filter creates a new array. That new array will be stored in the value of shopping. Ideally, this new array might be smaller or, well, smaller, never greater than. So this array would be smaller than the items array, and it will tell us, how many items we're still shopping for. And so now if we just return the shopping length, hopefully we can now see how many items we're shopping for. And so now what do we put in this mustache tag? Well, we just simply put the name of the function. And we don't need to call it as a function because computed does that implicitly, right? It understands and it knows that, hey, this particular method, anytime somebody interacts with one or more of these dependencies, I need to call this function. So it would be very redundant if Vue asked us to do this, right? Because we've already told it it's a computed value. We need you to continually compute this for us. So we just simply use it as a variable. So still shopping. Let's see if we can give this a better name. Still shopping for, and then we'll say items. Okay, maybe this is a little bit better variable naming. Okay. So let's go ahead and refresh our page, make sure we did all that. And so you can see we didn't hide it by a V show. So we could have done another V show here, or we could have just moved the span up into here. But it just kind of gives you at least a way you can hopefully see all this is interacting on the page. So that's working. So now if I say milk, you can see it says 1 item. Great. So now I say bread, it says 2 items. Great. So it is indeed computing each time, right? It's applying that filter function. Now let's make sure that that checkbox portion works. So if I check off milk, indeed it does work. I'm now still only shopping for 1 item, right? And if I check off bread, we can see that it was working. So this is a great place for computed because now if I have those 2 things checked off, but let's say, somebody remotely adds eggs, you can see that it will automatically go ahead and do its computation, right? And there you have the still shopping for 1 item. So even though I picked up milk and bread, I'm actually still shopping for eggs. And then again, if somebody were to remotely add something to my list, well, I still picked up milk and bread, but I'm still shopping for cookies and eggs. And then as soon as I pick up those items, boom, boom, check, you can see how it's constantly recomputing. So hopefully that's making a little bit of sense as to what's happening in that particular computed function. So again, this computed function, we're not using the, we don't need to call it, again, we don't need to do this because it is in that computed section. And so because it is in that computed section, and the way Vue looks at that, right, is it will go ahead and reevaluate anytime a dependency changes. And we know what the dependencies are because this computed section is using the items array and it's using that Boolean flag in the items cart. So anytime that's impacted right here, or we're adding a new item, that computed function is going ahead and it's running and it's executing perfectly. All right, so what might be sort of the next thing we might want to do? We might want to go ahead and add a button. All right. So here inside of our items, again, yeah, don't make the same mistake I did twice. Make sure you put it inside of that li. We might want a button class here, and so. Oops, yep, perfect. And so we might want to go ahead and get it a class. And again, this is just styling for Bootstrap. So we were gonna want a button. I think it should be a rather small button. And because it's gonna be a remove button, we're gonna color it red, which the code name for that is button danger. Cute. I want to style it by moving it to the far right. So I'm just going to do a little quick inline style here. And I'm going to just say, float right. Right? That's really kind of all that is. But then the biggest part of this button is how do we get it to click? So if we wanted to, we could use a key up again. But that's kind of a little bit hard to use a key up because when you're entering here, hitting enter makes a lot of natural sense when you're typing, cheese, right? That makes a lot of sense to hit enter. But if you have a button, it makes a lot more sense to click it. So we wouldn't want to use a key up. We would want to use the @click feature. And then in order to do this, we would want to make a function called remove item. And item. And then we would want to ensure that we closed that button tag. And then we might want to give it a name like remove. Okay. So let's go ahead and see, make sure that's all rendered properly on our page. Okay, so again, we'll just add some milk. And you can see that I'm going to click this here, and of course I'm going to get a warning because remove item is not a function, right? We haven't created that yet. So you can see that the click does indeed work. So let's go down here and we'll do remove item. I know a lot of people are getting probably super excited if they've read the homework and they're like, oh my God, you're going to answer this? No, I'm not. But I am going to help you get started. Item. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. We'll just add the console.log. Item. Okay. So if we just now do this one more time. And boom, remove item. You can see that our console.log is firing. All right. So that's kind of what we have for the demo. Getting trolled, I know. Yeah, I know, everybody's like, yes. But I did a lot of the work there. You can see that, and I really just did a lot of the work because I wanted to show you how to use this, this @click event, right? So I'm sure a lot of you could have picked up on this. Just the syntax here for the @click is now you're pointing this to the remove item function. Obviously, you want to pass in that item that you're trying to remove. I mean, Vue is smart, but it's not that smart, right? It's not just going to, and you can see there's no v model binding here, so it would be it'd have to be super intuitive to figure that out. So you're obviously wanting to pass that item into that remove item function, and then here you would do the logic to remove said item. So that kind of takes us, as I said, this is just a very simple demo. So that kind of takes us to the lab assignment, right? So let's get to that, especially since now that we have this remove button here. All right, week 13, lab. All right, so this is a week to do this, but this is like, you know, I feel like this is probably, you don't really even need this week. You could probably really just knock this out even in the hour and like hour and 20 minutes that we have left in class for the lab. But essentially you're gonna want to add the remove item method, which we kind of already did, so that's nice. But you're going to want to make sure that it actually works, right? Can still shopping be in the methods? What do you mean? Could still shopping be in here? Is this what are you saying you want still shopping to be like here? Is that the question? The answer to that is technically yes, but not if you want it to do this dynamic calculations. The only difference between computed and methods is this will go, Vue will automatically go ahead and fire anything in computed anytime a dependency changes that it might need a recomputation, right? So once, if it's under computed, then it will do all that computation dynamically as you're adding things, as you're checking them off. Methods have to be called physically. So you'll notice that you'll notice here that, you know, the only time remove item gets called is when somebody actually clicks that button, right? Where computed is getting fired pretty much every time here, because every time something gets added to this list, computed's having to basically reevaluate this count here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so hopefully that is making sense. So because computed is having to do a calculation each time, that's really right. That's really why. Otherwise you'd have to call still shopping manually, and then how do you really call still shopping manually if you don't want a user to have to interact with it, right? We don't want to have a user to like say like click a little button that says refresh my count. That would be super painful for a user, right? So we want this to be done, you know, nice and simply. So it's kind of a separation of concerns, as you're seeing. So if you're physically wanting the user to interact, then you would put that in your methods of add item, remove item, right? Your user is physically interacting. Anything that you want to do behind the scenes and just do a nicety for your user and count things, or I mean, it could be a lot more than just counting. It could be timestamps, you know, that kind of thing. Like when you upload a file to CSNS, right? Yeah, basically background hands-off stuff. Yeah, like another great example for computed would be CSNS, right? When you upload your file, it gets a timestamp created for it. So it would be like really weird if you as a user had to upload your file and then click something that said generate timestamp, right? That'd be like a weird interaction. So computed would be one of those things where you'd upload a file, and the computed would then display the timestamp based off of what was happened after it was uploaded. So anything that's kind of hands-off, correct? Great phrasing. I like that. All right, so back to the actual lab. So you're going to want to go ahead and make this remove item function work, right? So we kind of took care of bullet point 1 actually already in class. So you're going to be taking care of bullet point 2, which says the remove item method obviously should remove the item from the grocery list completely. So when the user clicks the remove button on the UI, the corresponding item is then removed. So you're really taking care of that one. Add a in-cart method. So this is add a in-cart computed method. So that would be, you know, computed method here. And this in-cart computed method will simply be kind of the opposite as the still shopping cart. So this will count how many items are actually in the cart, right? You could eventually, yes, we are going to move this scripts portion into a JS file, but for simplicity's sake and grading's sake, we're going to keep it all in the HTML because the only thing that the only thing I'm going to allow the lab to upload is an HTML file. And then I don't want to have to, you know, especially if you're not, if like, I just don't want to have to like match up those dependencies with student submissions this particular, you know, if it's not bundled appropriately, right? If it's not bundled properly, then like your HTML file isn't properly referencing your JS file, right? So, right. So right now we're just going to stick to this one template, this one easy HTML file. And then yes, as we get into more and more understanding, right, we are going to have to break apart this app because eventually we're going to integrate Deco cards with this app, and we don't want all the JavaScript code in one file. So for this week, we're just going to be using the HTML file. So for your lab, all you need to do is upload a simple HTML file. But yes, you could, in theory, absolutely 100% move the scripts portion into a JS file. And that's typically the way you see it handled. Most people do, unless it's a super tiny Vue app, most people do not embed the Vue, that app instance like we're doing now. That's just because, you know, this is simplicity's sake, this is the intro into Vue. So you're essentially going to add a in-cart computed method, and this method is going to compute the items that are in the cart, right? So the in-cart computed method should count the items that have been actually placed in the cart. So when an item is checked off from the list, then the in-count cart would increase. So essentially you have two competing counters. You have, you know, the still shopping for counter. And so eventually, you know, you're going to have an in-cart counter. So they're exactly the opposite counters. If you're still shopping for 0 items, then hopefully 2 items are in your cart. And I'll show you the final demo of this so that you can kind of see it after we go through here. And then lastly, you're going to want to update the items list to include a strike-through effect when an item is checked off the list. So right now, you see we just have a check mark, but we're wanting to check it off the list, right? And so to give our users a better experience and feel, it makes sense if we physically cross it off the list. So what you want to do is just apply a CSS or HTML effect that when the user checks this button, this essentially gets some sort of strike-through effect, right? And how you choose to do that is not, you know, I don't have too many preferences on that, so that's why I say you can use HTML and or CSS to apply this effect. And you can use whichever Vue directive that you prefer. So if you want to use the Vue if or the Vue bind or any other one that you, you know, you want to try out, you can go ahead and do that. I would say the easiest one to use is going to be the Vue if, right? Because that's an if-else statement, and it's very Boolean-y to say, yes, it's added to the cart, no, it's not in the cart, right? So if and else make it very simplistic to perform this number 3. Vue bind is a bit more difficult. It's not really that complex, but if you're kind of wanting to research a Vue directive, Vue bind would be like a great, more advanced way to do this. Vue bind is a way to bind CSS to a particular element. So instead of writing the if, you simply write the if statement inside of your Vue bind. That would be a way. So let me show you in another tab what this looks like. Go to Finder. Go to here. Sorry, I'm browsing on my second screen real quick to get to the solutions. CSULA, Spring 2020, this one, week 13, Vue application, open with. There we go, Google Chrome. There we go. Okay, here we go. this should be the answers. Okay, so yeah. So if I do milk, yeah, here we go. So bread, cookies. Okay, so first you can see still shopping is working. And if I use check it off, you can see that the in cart incremented to 1, still shopping decremented to 2, and cookies here got the strike through applied to it. So this this goes ahead, and so we'll go ahead and we'll just we'll remove bread. And so you can see bread went ahead and got removed, right? We have one item we're still shopping for, which is milk, and we have one item in the cart, which is cookies. So this this demo here meets the midterm, or sorry, midterm, wow, meets the lab grade, meets the lab criteria